There are days that seem to exist only to be remembered. Sparrows chirping on the rooftops, and the warm scent of toasted bread drifting from the familiar bakery on the corner. Yet one thing made it different: a letter that appeared in my mailbox, brief, with no name of the sender. Tomorrow afternoon. Bring a picnic basket and come to the great oak tree at the end of the meadow. There you will find the story you've been waiting for. I read that note again and again. I could have sent such a strange invitation. And what kind of story was waiting for me beneath the ancient branches of a tree? Da-da-da. I was not the type to be easily drawn into mysteries. Yet that day something stirred inside me as restless curiosity. Perhaps it was because I hadn't truly given myself a pause for so long. My days had become a blur of work, rushed meetings, and weary evenings spent scrolling through my phone. I decided to share it with my closest friends. Alex, always ready for any adventure. Emitha, one who loved capturing memories with her camera, and Daniela, self-taught guitarist who carried music in his heart wherever he went. The three of them lit up immediately, far more excited than cautious. Alex laughed loudly. A picnic under an oak tree? Even if there's no mystery at all, it's worth it. At least we'll escape the crowded city for a day. Emma was all ready, picturing countless aesthetic shots under the shade of the tree. Danu, of course, asked only one question. Should I bring the guitar or the ukulele? And just like that, the decision was made. The next afternoon, we would pack a basket of food, a few books, one instrument, and let the journey unfold. The night before the picnic, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept sketching the image of a massive oak tree, standing tall and proud in the middle of a wide meadow. I wondered, had this oak sheltered a weary farmer once upon a time? Had it been a secret meeting place for young lovers? Or, as the letter suggested, did it truly hold a story waiting for us to uncover? When the clock struck midnight, I finally drifted into sleep. I met Alex, Emma, and Daniel at the small bus station near my house. Ow. Them carried something. Alex clutched a woven basket stuffed with food. Emma carefully held her camera and a vintage picnic blanket. Daniel, of course, had his guitar slung across his back. I carried a few books and a bottle of cool lemonade. On the way, we filled the air with chatter and laughter. Alex kept speculating about the sender of the letter. Maybe it's just someone playing a prank. Or what if we're about to stumble into a treasure hunt? Emma insisted it was more like a scene from a romance film. I bet it's a secret admirer, trying to surprise you. She shot me a teasing look. I only smiled faintly. Deep inside, I didn't know what to expect. But the closer we got to the meadow, the more my anticipation grew. The bus dropped us off at a small town on the city's edge. From there, we walked nearly 2 kilometers before reaching the meadow mentioned in the letter. The dirt road stretched ahead, flanked by wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze, and then, in the distance, I saw it. The silhouette of a giant oak tree, its crown spreading like a vast umbrella, standing proud in the endless green field. There it is, Alex exclaimed, quickening his pace. I stopped for a moment, staring. The oak was even more majestic than I had imagined. Its branches stretched in every direction, weaving together into a natural canopy. From afar, it looked like an ancient guardian, a wise elder who had silently witnessed the changing of seasons. For centuries, and in that instant, I felt the sense that something was waiting beneath those branches. Not just a simple picnic, but something more. The meadow grew larger with every step, the oak tree looming like a silent sentinel waiting at the horizon. The air was fresher out here, tinged with the sweetness of wildflowers and the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. It was as though the world had slowed down, letting us breathe differently, deeper. Fuller, freer, careful, Emma said as she adjusted her camera strap, her eyes darting from the dirt road to the tall grasses swaying beside it. She knelt briefly to snap a picture of a cluster of yellow daisies. You're going to have a whole gallery of flowers. Before we even sit down, Emma grinned, brushing the dirt off her knees. And one day you'll thank me when you realize how much we'd have forgotten without pictures. Daniel plucked at the strings of his guitar as he walked, letting random notes drift lazily into the morning air. Besides, he said with a wink, music and photos are the only things that make memories immortal. I smiled quietly, watching the three of them. They were so different. Alex, with his restless energy, Emma with her eye for beauty, Daniel with his easy rhythm, and yet they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Perhaps that was why the letter hadn't scared me. Whatever lay ahead under the oak tree, at least I wouldn't be facing it alone. When we finally reached the meadow, the oak tree towered above us, even more majestic than it had seemed from afar. Its branches stretched outward as though welcoming us, casting a shadow wide enough to shelter all four of us with ease. The grass beneath it was soft and thick, dotted with tiny white clover blossoms. "This," Alex declared, setting down the picnic basket with a triumphant grin, "is perfect." Emma unfurled her vintage blanket and spread it across the grass. Its faded patterns, roses, and vines looked almost like something that belonged here, blending into the wild green around us. Daniel leaned his guitar against the trunk of the oak, then flopped down with a sigh of relief. "First things first," Alex announced, opening the basket like a magician revealing his tricks. Inside were sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, jars of fresh fruit, cheese, and even a small chocolate cake he'd insisted on bringing despite our protests about weight. Picnic rule number 1, food before philosophy. We laughed and began unpacking. The sandwiches tasted better than they ever could have in the city. Lemonade was colder, sweeter, more refreshing. Maybe it was the meadow, or the shade, or simply the fact that we had nowhere else to be. "Okay," Emma said between bites, her camera balanced on her lap. "So let's talk about the letter. Who do you think sent it?" "I still say treasure hunt," Alex replied immediately, licking crumbs from his fingers. "Maybe we'll find some old chest buried under the roots of the tree." Daniel chuckled. "You've watched too many adventure movies." "If you ask me, it sounds more like, I don't know, a local legend. Maybe the oak tree has some story tied to it." Emma raised an eyebrow. "A haunted oak? Ghosts whispering in the leaves?" "Not haunted," Daniel corrected. He strummed a soft chord on his guitar. "More like enchanted. Trees like this, they've seen things. They've stood longer than we've been alive. Who knows what kind of energy gets trapped in them?" His words left a quiet hush over us. For a moment, I almost expected the branches to stir in response, the leaves rustling with a secret we weren't meant to hear yet. After we finished eating, Alex suggested a game of cards, but Emma was already wandering with her camera, chasing butterflies and angles of sunlight. Daniel began tuning his guitar in earnest, the notes rippling out and blending with the songs of meadowlarks nearby. I lay back on the blanket, gazing up through the lattice of branches above. Patches of sky peeked through, shifting as the leaves swayed. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The kind that doesn't demand silence, but is born naturally from laughter, music, and the hum of life surrounding you. "Hey," Alex's voice broke my reverie. "Come on, you can't just nap. At least read us something from those books you brought." I sat up, pulling a slim volume from my bag. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you it's poetry." "Perfect," Daniel said, strumming. "A gentle rhythm. You read, I'll play. Instant soundtrack." So I began to read aloud, my words weaving with the strum of his guitar. The meadow seemed to listen, the wind carrying the verses further than my voice ever could. Emma returned and snapped a photo at that exact moment. Alex grinning, Daniel lost in his chords. Me holding a book with sunlight spilling across the pages. It was one of those rare instances where you knew, even while it was happening, that you'd never forget it. Hours slipped by like minutes. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. The shadows stretched longer, the air cooler. A hush seemed to fall over the meadow, as though the day itself were preparing for something. I noticed. At first, the shift in the wind. The leaves of the oak shivered, not violently, but in a way that drew attention. It was almost like a whisper, subtle but intentional. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Alex raised an eyebrow. "The wind?" "No," I insisted, sitting up straighter. "It was different. Like, I trailed off. Because how could I explain it? A sound that wasn't exactly a sound, more like a breath brushing past the edge of hearing. Daniel paused mid-chord. I felt it too, he said quietly. Emma lowered her camera. You guys are freaking me out. But even she glanced toward the canopy, her expression uncertain. The oak tree loomed larger now, its branches bending as though leaning closer. It's listening. The golden light of late afternoon spread across the meadow like a soft blanket. Shadows stretched long and thin, and the air cooled just enough to make us pull the edges of the blanket closer. The oak tree above us swayed gently, its leaves catching the sunlight like pieces of stained glass. It's beautiful, Emma whispered, adjusting her camera for yet another shot. Branches carved shapes into the sky. Forget the camera for a minute, Alex said, tossing her an apple from the basket. Just enjoy it. She laughed, letting the apple fall onto the blanket, but kept her eye pressed against the viewfinder anyway. Daniel strummed a tune, this time more deliberate, his fingers dancing across the strings with surprising grace. All right, he said. If we're really making this a proper picnic, then we need a soundtrack. He played, and his music filled the space between us. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it was alive, playful one moment, aching the next. Emma set her camera down at last, leaning back on her elbows to listen. Alex hummed along in a half-joking way, but soon his voice steadied, and the three of us were carried by Daniel's rhythm. I watched them and felt a warmth bloom inside me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't worried about deadlines, messages, or the weight of tomorrow. There was only this: friends, laughter, music, and the endless canopy of the oak. Your turn, Alex said suddenly, nudging me with his elbow. My turn for what? Story time. You've been suspiciously quiet while we've all been entertaining you. I hesitated, then opened the small notebook I always carried. It wasn't meant for others. It was filled with half-finished thoughts. Dreams scribbled at 2 a.m., fragments of poems that never found endings. But something about that moment made me want to share, so I read. Not a polished story, not even a full one, just a few lines about searching for stillness in a restless world. When I finished, there was silence, but not the uncomfortable kind. That's actually really good, Emma said softly. Daniel nodded, plucking a final note that seemed to underline her words. You should write more. There's something in the way you say things, like the world slows down to listen. I felt my face flush, but before I could answer, Alex raised his drink in mock solemnity. 2 words, 2 music, 2 pictures, and to this picnic under the oak tree. May we remember it when we're old and boring? He clinked glasses of lemonade and laughed, the sound echoing across the empty field. As the sun dipped closer to the horizon, the light shifted, painting everything. In hues of amber and rose, we sprawled on the blanket, lazily picking at the remnants of food, our conversations drifting from childhood memories to wild what-if scenarios about the future. Do you ever think, Emma asked, staring at the branches above that, trees might remember things? Like really remember them? All the people who've sat here? All the moments that happened under their shade? Daniel plucked a low, thoughtful note. Why not? If we carry memories in our hearts, maybe trees carry them in their rings. Alex chuckled. Next you'll tell me this oak knows our names. But even he glanced upward after he spoke, as though half expecting a response. I closed my eyes, listening. The breeze had picked up again, and the rustle of leaves was steady, almost patterned. It did sound like whispering, faint, layered, endless. And then it happened. The air shifted cooler, heavier, as if the meadow itself was holding its breath. The oak's branches shivered, though the rest of the meadow remained still. No, the sound of leaves became clearer, sharper, forming something that felt impossibly close to words. Emma sat up, her camera forgotten beside her. Did you hear that? She whispered. This time there was no mistaking it. The tree was speaking, or at least, that's what it felt like. Not in full sentences, but in impressions, in a language. Older than sound, I felt it in my chest more than I heard it. Stay. Remember. Listen. Daniel's guitar went silent in his lap. Alex's usual grin had vanished, replaced by a frown of disbelief. Kay, tell me someone else heard that too, he muttered. I did, Emma breathed. Her eyes were wide, reflecting. The flickering light through the branches, so did I, Daniel admitted. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. We sat in stunned silence. The oak stood above us, massive and unmoving, yet alive in a way we'd never noticed before. The moment stretched, fragile and unreal. Then Alex, perhaps out of nervous energy, picked up a fallen acorn and tossed it into the air. He said, forcing a laugh, "If the tree is trying to talk to us, I hope it likes cake, 'cause that's all we've got left to offer." But none of us really laughed with him. The air was too thick, too charged. The whispers rose again, this time mingling with the creak of branches. It was as though the oak was remembering aloud, recalling echoes of voices from years long gone. I caught flashes in my mind, images that weren't mine. Children running barefoot through the grass. A couple carving initials into bark. An old man resting with a book. They were vivid, too vivid to be imagined. I blinked hard, the visions dissolving as quickly as they came. My heart pounded, but strangely I didn't feel fear. It was something else, awe, the weight of standing in the presence of something far larger than myself. Emma finally spoke, her voice trembling. "It's showing us memories." Daniel nodded slowly. "The tree remembers." Alex looked from one to the other, torn between skepticism and belief, but he didn't deny it. None of us could. The air itself seemed thick with the truth. Of it we huddled closer beneath the branches, not out of fear, but out of instinct, like pilgrims at the foot of a shrine. The whispers ebbed and flowed, carrying fragments of forgotten lives, weaving them into the cool evening air, and as the last rays of the sun slipped behind the hills, the oak tree seemed to sigh, a long exhale that rustled every leaf at once. The meadow had fallen silent. Only the steady rhythm of our breathing and the faint hum of insects remained, as though even the birds were listening to what would happen next. The oak tree loomed above, its branches stretched wide like the arms of something eternal. We sat huddled close together on the blanket, caught between disbelief and wonder. Then, without warning, a single acorn dropped from above. It didn't bounce or roll as expected, landed softly in the center of our blanket, as though placed there. Emma reached out, hesitating. "Should I?" "Go ahead," Daniel whispered, his guitar resting forgotten at his side. She picked it up. The acorn was ordinary in shape and size, but the moment her fingers closed around it, the air seemed to hum. Faint glow traced along the ridges of its shell like embers hidden beneath wood. "Oh my God," Alex breathed. "Tell me I'm not hallucinating." "You're not," I said, my voice barely audible. I could feel the energy radiating from it, subtle but undeniable. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and alive. Emma passed the acorn to me. The warmth spread through my palm, up my arm, and into my chest. In that instant, I wasn't in the meadow anymore. I saw visions, vivid, fleeting, layered. Children running. Under the oak's branches in the 1800s, women in long dresses gathering wildflowers, soldiers resting beneath the shade, their uniforms torn and weary. Each memory flashed like a slide, one after the other, too many to fully grasp, but all anchored. Here in this single tree, I gasped and dropped the acorn onto the blanket. The visions stopped instantly. My heart pounded, my breath ragged. "You saw something," Daniel said, leaning forward. I nodded. "Memories, not mine. The trees." Alex picked it up next, holding it cautiously, as if it might burn him. His eyes widened. I saw a man carving initials into the bark. He was laughing. A woman was beside him. His voice cracked unexpectedly. It felt so real. Daniel took it after him, and his face softened as though he'd been transported. Somewhere gentler. "A boy," he whispered. He couldn't have been older than 10. He was lying here right where we are, staring at the clouds. He was humming. I could hear him. Emma clutched her camera to her chest, her knuckles white. "It's giving us the past," she said. "The oak is showing us everything it's witnessed." Her voice trembled with awe and something else's fear. 4. A long time, we sat in silence, passing the acorn from hand to hand, each of us glimpsing fragments of lives long gone. The air grew cooler, the sky deepening into twilight, and with each vision we felt more connected not just to the tree, but to every soul that had ever rested beneath it. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "It's a gift." "A gift," Alex echoed. "Yes, think about it. The tree could have kept its memories locked away forever, but it chose to share them with us. Maybe it wants us to carry them forward so they're not forgotten." Emma shook her head slowly. "But why us? Out of everyone who's ever come here, why now?" No one had an answer. As darkness settled, the glow from the acorn became more visible, faint but steady. It lit the space between us like a lantern, soft and warm. Alex reached for it again, but stopped midway, his hand trembling. "So what do we do with it? Keep it? Bury it? Offer it back?" Daniel strummed a single chord on his guitar, the sound low and resonant. "We listen, that's all. We don't take from the oak. We learn from it." Emma raised her camera as if to capture the moment, then lowered it again. No picture could do this justice. Her words hung in the air, true and heavy. I held the acorn one last time, and a final vision washed over me. This time it wasn't the past, it was us. The four of us under the tree, just as we were now, our faces lit by twilight, and behind us, countless shadows of others, generations, blending into one another, all bound by the oak's roots. It wasn't showing me a memory, it was showing me a continuation. When I opened my eyes, I realized tears were streaming down my face. Not out of sadness, but out of an overwhelming sense of belonging. "This isn't just about remembering," I said softly. "It's about being part of the story. We're connected now, past, present, and future." The others stared at me, and though no one spoke, I knew they understood. The night deepened, stars scattering across the sky. We packed our things slowly, almost reluctantly, as though leaving too quickly would break the spell. Before we folded the blanket, Emma placed the acorn gently at the base of the oak. "Thank you," she whispered. The branches stirred, though there was no wind. The leaves rustled with a sound that felt like acknowledgement, like farewell. We stood in silence, staring at the great tree silhouetted against the night sky. None of us wanted to turn away, but eventually Alex broke the stillness with a quiet chuckle. "Well," he said, his voice softer than usual, "that was the strangest, most amazing picnic I've ever had." We laughed, but it wasn't the carefree laughter from earlier. It was deeper, touched with reverence, bound by what we had shared, and as we walked back across the meadow under the light of the stars, we carried with us more than food or music or photographs. We carried the oak's gift, its memories, its whispers, its reminder that nothing is ever truly lost as long as someone remembers. We walked in silence most of the way back, our footsteps crunching against the dirt path. The stars above seemed brighter than usual, as though the sky itself wanted to remind us of how small we were and how vast the world could be. No one spoke for a long time. It wasn't an awkward silence, but the kind that settles after something sacred. Words would have felt clumsy, too small for what we had just experienced. Finally, Alex broke the quiet. "So, are we just not going to talk about how a tree basically handed us its diary?" Emma laughed softly, the sound tired but genuine. It wasn't a diary, it was history. 1,000 lives woven together. Daniel adjusted the strap of his guitar, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "And now we're part of it." I nodded, clutching the small notebook in my bag. The vision still pulsed at the edge of my memory, as though the oak's whispers lingered inside me. I knew they would never leave. Back in town, life resumed its usual rhythm. Cars honked, phones buzzed, deadlines pressed down again. Yet, beneath the noise, something had shifted in all of us. Emma started developing her photos, and though they were beautiful golden light, laughter frozen in frames, she kept saying, "They're incomplete. They can't capture what really happened." Alex, restless as ever, tried to joke it off, but I caught him staring at the skyline sometimes, lost in thought. Once, when he thought no one was looking, I saw him sketching the outline of the oak in the margin of a notebook. Daniel's music changed too. His songs carried a depth they hadn't before, notes that seemed older than him, as if the oak had lent him its echoes. People noticed. They leaned closer when he played, sensing something different, and me wrote. Pages and pages poured out of me, not just poems but whole stories. Some were about the visions, others about us, and some about people I'd never met yet felt I somehow knew. Words came like water from a spring I hadn't realized was there. Weeks later, we returned to the meadow. None of us said it out loud, but we all felt the pull. The oak stood waiting, unchanged, as eternal as ever. The blanket spread across the grass again. The basket opened. The guitar leaned against the trunk. It was as if time folded back on itself, bringing us to the same moment, but carrying the weight of everything we now knew. This time, though, the oak was quiet. No whispers, no glowing acorns, just stillness. "Do you think it's finished?" I asked, her hand brushing the grass. Daniel shook his head. "No, it showed us what it wanted to."
Now it's our turn.
"Our turn for what?" Alex asked too. "Remember," Daniel said simply, "to keep the stories alive." We fell silent, each of us staring at the branches. The oak had given us a gift, but it wasn't something to hoard. It was a responsibility. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I read aloud from my notebook. A story about the boy Daniel had seen, humming beneath the clouds. A story about the couple Alex described, carving initials into bark. A story about the countless faces Emma couldn't capture with her lens, but still felt in her heart. Daniel played softly behind me, his chords weaving through the words like thread through fabric. Emma listened with her camera in her lap, but she didn't take a single photo. Alex lay on his back staring at the canopy, smiling faintly. And for the first time, I realized the oak hadn't chosen us by chance. It chose us because together, through words, music, laughter, and vision, we could carry its memories forward. We could give them new life. As twilight deepened, the leaves stirred one final time. Not a whisper, not a vision, just the sound of the meadow breathing, the tree settling into its ancient rhythm. We packed up slowly, reverently. Before leaving, Emma placed her hand against the trunk. Alex did the same, then Daniel, then me. The bark was rough and cool beneath my palm. Beneath that, I felt something deeper, a steady, endless pulse. Not goodbye, not even farewell. It's just continuity. Years later, when I think back on that picnic under the oak, I realize the true gift wasn't the acorn or even the visions. It was the reminder that we are never isolated. Every step we take rests on the stories of those who came before us. Every breath we leave behind becomes part of the air for those who follow. Emma went on to publish a photo series not of the oak itself, but of people and places that carried the same quiet magic. She called it Whispers of Time. Daniel recorded an album that critics described as hauntingly timeless. He never explained the inspiration, but I knew. Alex traveled. More than ever, chasing adventures, but he always carried a sketchbook. Every page held trees. Oaks, pines, willows each, one shaped slightly like the branches that had once reached over us and me. I wrote this story because the oak asked us to remember, and this is how I do it. The meadow is still there. The oak is still there. Maybe one day someone else will wander under its branches and feel that same pull. Maybe they'll sit down, share a meal, laugh, dream, and listen. And when the whispers come, they'll know. They are not alone. The oak remembers. And now, so do we.